And do you want to give a quick intro background, Maggie, and then we can start screen sharing and dive into it?
Sure. So if anyone's not familiar with my work, which I'm sure plenty of people on Earth, I work as the art director, visual illustrator for Egghead, which is a company that teaches web programming. And I'm really I studied cultural anthropology originally, so I'm really into like metaphor and linguistics and general cultural analysis stuff. And I have a website I have built in Gatsby, and it has a number of various features that you'll get to see, like a bookshelf and a digital garden, which is what cool people call just a blog or public notes. I think that's what we're going with. It's one way I don't think we haven't agreed upon collective definition. But Tom, who's in here, was one of the instigators of that. Well done starting that buzzword trend. I'm sure lots of consultants have picked up on it. So do you want me to do screen sharing?
Yeah, the general format, like maybe screen sharing with site and source available.
Sure.
We can kind of hop between them and see how it takes us.
Okay. That sounds
for folks who have questions or anything, you can drop it in the chat and I'll try and bring it up. And if there's a gap and you just want to hop in as well, that's totally fine.
It says host has disabled screen sharing, so you might need to change permission.
Every time. There you
go. Share. All right, can you guys see a VS Code editor?
Yep.
Okay. Let's get it up and running. I just remembered to pull from master, so this should be the up-to-date version. Alrighty, loading. It's actually much faster load time than it used to be. So Gatsby, if you have a really image-heavy site, is just a nightmare. But I started hosting all my images on Cloudinary and then just pulling in the URL, and now it'll build pretty quick. So that's a nice. Once I found that out, my life got a lot better. I used to like sit here for 8 minutes while my site built.
Is that because it's doing all like image processing stuff locally, or just like binary files throw it off?
Gatsby uses something called Gatsby Image, where it optimizes everything for you, which is great. It'll do like lazy loads, and it'll do like SVG blur, and then it'll load the full quality version. But I'm terrible. Well, I always want the highest quality, like PNG giant, like 3,000 pixel images for everything, which is completely unnecessary. But yeah, it made it very slow. But Cloudinary just solves the issue. I can have my nice high-res images and not have to wait. All right, so we're up and running. So let's go local. So maybe so this is what it looks like if you've ever been there. This is the homepage. So we have our digital gardening section that I try to keep updated every few days. This week's been a little bit behind. I'm one of those when working on a conference talk for next month, and like everything else like falls off the map because you're in such a desperate rush to not be publicly shamed on stage. I have an illustrated essay section, so that's like longer form posts that usually have visuals to them. Here I have like illustration projects I've worked on. I've only maybe got a couple of those up. I'm not like preferencing those as much on this. I'm more concerned about people being able to read more interesting content. And then I have a bookshelf where I put very loose, unorganized notes from books I'm reading. So this one is a book by Edward Tufte, and it's literally just like I've copied and pasted this out of Rome and cleaned it up a little bit. But you can then add in like images of things they're referencing, which gives some nice context. But yeah, these are not very refined notes. This is my little bookshelf of things I'm have recently read or I'm currently reading. And a lot of these are in progress too. I jump around with books, so like a lot of these will have notes on like chapter 1 and chapter 7, and will be filled in later as I continue reading them. So the digital garden is really the thing that Twitter likes to get buzzy about. So this is what I call an open collection of notes, resources, sketches, and explorations. So these have different levels of doneness to them, which in the gardening metaphor are evergreens, seedlings, and budding. And I need to change the order of these because seedlings are the smallest ones. Then they become budding, and then they're evergreen, which just means they're sort of done, and I'm probably not going to be touching them anymore. And those will eventually graduate to be essays if they're long enough and hefty enough. And so I have a little filtering system happening here where if I want to see only evergreens, I hit my little evergreen filter, and I have a little evergreen emoji on these. So these are all the evergreen notes, and these are all the seedlings, and these are all the current buddings. And then on each one of these, it'll also have its current status on there and when I last tended it. So this one's been a while, but hey, this is a brief history of the digital garden I'm working on. But if you get to the bottom, oh wait, where did I put it? I have a nice draft in progress symbol, so you can tell like everything below here is pretty rough, but everything above here, kind of okay. I also like this. I have a little footnote component that I got off Tuft CSS, which is a library based off Edward Tuft. And it has a really nice responsive component to it. So if I am now on a smaller screen or a mobile, and I hit that, the footnote will still pop up there. But then if I go, where's my breakpoint? Yeah, about medium, it'll pop up again.
And that's done
with
just CSS, and no, because I've seen a bunch of side notes implementations that have a like JavaScript element to it.
Yeah, it's just CSS, which is nice. I tried a JavaScript one, but it was just a bit too finicky. So this is what it looks like behind the scenes. So this is a Gatsby project, which mostly uses React. And I have a lot of components going on, maybe more than I should. One of these is a footnote. I don't know where it would have put it. There it is. Found it. So yeah, behind the scenes, it's just a whole bunch of CSS and JS. And then it pops out this like handy trick where it makes the number a label, it's an input element, and then you just stick the side note inside a span, and that's a little handy trick. Actually, Tuft CSS. Yeah. So this is what I'm using. Nice. And they have the whole thing on here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really sneaky using the checkbox selectors. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
And then, so this is I noticed in the MDX folder in the components. And so these are all things you'd reference directly in the markup for your posts.
Yeah, so this is where I'm pretty sure all Gatsby sites are organized this way. If you have MDX files where you have components, right? So these are all different React components of various scales. So like this is my whole notes template. So anything that's a garden note goes through this template. Or like here's my footer. So everything's, components that are little bits and pieces of the site. So these are all more generic ones for the top level. And then MDX is a way to put JSX into Markdown. So actually, let me show you an example of what that looks like. So if I go into one of my notes, so these are my notes that are in the digital garden. So if I go into evergreens, so this is what they look like. They have Markdown front matter, the same as you would in any Markdown file. But then I'm able to put HTML. I think you put HTML Markdown, but I'm able to put JSX in here. So this image with the capital letter means I'm importing a React component that is in this file. It's in my image styles. So that is this, which is this is a bit of a simple one, but this is a function it's using CSS. Emotion, which is a CSS and JS framework, to just apply a bunch of styles to an image component. That one's a bit odd actually to explain. But you can see I'm passing props here, so I can make the width variable within my MDX. And I forget how complex this all gets.
When you're importing these, do you just import them at the top of every MDX file, or is there kind of like a local space that is just pulling everything in the MDX folder?
It's global. So anything inside this MDX folder, I have an index.js file, which is kind of gross and enormous. you can see here, I'm importing every single one of these from this file and then exporting a default object that assigns like H1, H2, H3, and then things like this is like a 2-column component. This is like a book component. This is like a full width 2-column. So I've made all of these custom. I'm sure there's a more like efficient way to do this, but
It works.
yeah, this is me using the skills I have, you know, kind of thing. Like this is like this component right here just says like this post is coming soon. It's like that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
So then actually that, if I go find that in the MDX, that might explain it better. Yeah. So this is a note that I'm writing, right? And you can see I'm using image components and like HTML all the way through it. And then all I've done is popped that coming soon component in. And then the way that renders, where did Chrome go? Lost it. That one is at the bottom. What would I put that under? This one. So that's the post we're looking at. See, and I was able to make this like, oh, cool hovers.
Nice.
Right. And then that's that coming soon component.
Gotcha.
Another thing might be to look at this linked references thing going on here. So that's the bidirectional linking, which is pretty magical. So let me show how it works first, and then I can show the back end of it. So on all of these notes, I'm bidirectionally linking them. So this one will have one. So this post, if I hover over that, that's an external link, right? That's going to Stian's blog. And this one is an internal link, the orange ones. So then we get a little preview of where we're about to head to. So we're about to head to a post called Tending the Rome Garden. If I click on that. So now we're on this post that was linked to it. And if I go all the way to the bottom of it, oh, it's a bit long. This linked references section shows all the other places I've bidirectionally linked this post to. So that was the one we were just on. I also have like this post about evergreen notes. And somewhere on here, see, there's that same bidirectional link. And at the bottom of this one, it has different linked references. Well, it only has that one, but some of them have quite a few. So I'm trying to like build them up. So the way that's working is, let me find that exact post, evergreens. I have to find where I did the bidirectional link. Oh, there it is. It doesn't show up in color, which is why it was funny. That double bracket, so this is based off Rome research, the way they do bidirectional links is they double bracket it. That bidirectional link right there is being powered by Angus is Gatsby plugin or theme, Gatsby theme brain. And actually, if I search that up, Gatsby theme brain, it'll find it. There it is. So this is a really wonderful theme that Angus built that lets you do these. And it's a little bit finicky, but he explains it pretty well here. And actually, if people with more simple Gatsby sites, this probably is not too hard to implement in. Mine took quite a bit of work. I had to do something called shadowing the component. So usually you would just install it and you could bidirectionally link inside your MBX and it would just work great. But I had to do a bit of a custom job on it because I already had my Gatsby site set up and it was just like a little too customized.
Huh.
Okay. But it like takes in the note here. It's calling a GraphQL query, and GraphQL is a way to get data into Gatsby. It sets up like a references block. See, in the comments here, this is me explaining to myself in detail what all of these do because I didn't know when I first did it. I don't know if anyone else writes this in their code. This is how you make sure future you is going to know what this section of code is going to do. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but it essentially links it up and it wraps every MDX file, it wraps it around it and somehow does some magic behind the scenes to make them link up. I'm not going to pretend I actually understand what's going on there.
Wild. Is the configuration for this entirely contained in this component, or did you have to like touch things in different places to get it to work?
So this, I think this is the real, oh no, that's just rendering it. So yeah, most of the logic is in this bring note.js, which is like Angus's library would have had that same file. And when I shadow it, I make a version in my own project, and I just say overwrite certain bits of it with my file.
Damn.
And then this one just does most of the GraphQL queries. You can see here it's calling, it's looking for any inbound references to the note, and then it's looking for any outbound references of other things it's referencing. And so it's passing those in.
Okay.
And that's just passing that through, and that goes into this note here, and links those up like with a whole bunch of stuff here, like mapping them over reference items. And
so this is just handling, making the data available, and it then passes that to the specific page for every note, and or is there like some top level layout that handles that? Like where are you actually rendering the backlinks?
So like these reference notes, this is a component reference item.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is, it's outside reference block. Yeah, so this is like a component in itself, and this is doing the styling on like each individual reference bit. And this is like the whole block of all the linked references styled here, and that all gets passed into a note.js component. So this is that reference block. And this component here does all my digital garden notes. So this is kind of like a whole bunch of styling, and then it essentially just renders the MDX, and this MDX renderer is what wraps all of that together, and the reference block goes below it.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
What was the like development process for getting the like features for this setup? Was it just like you started really small with work done up there?
A lot.
Okay.
I have to say, a lot of my development help comes from Ian Jones, who's one of my colleagues at Egghead. So whenever I'm stuck with something, I'll bang my head against it for like an hour, and then I'll just be like, hey, and I need to like pair program because I'm really stuck. He's just a lot better at troubleshooting, and a lot more of he's a developer, and I'm like I like to muck about in MDX kind of person.
Do you feel that like Gatsby and all this kind of infrastructure is amenable to the mucking about approach, or does it put more barriers in your way?
Yeah, I think as long as you're comfortable with JavaScript and basic React, Gatsby's not too bad. But saying as long as you're comfortable with JavaScript and React is like saying, well, as long as you've like spent a lot of time like wading through the hell of learning modern web development to some decent amount. But to be honest, the way I actually learned all this was like maybe 2 years ago. I started actually properly trying to learn to program in a more sincere way. Than just like before. I knew HTML and CSS and how to make things move with JavaScript a little bit, but I really didn't understand any of, like, I didn't know Node, I didn't know development environments. I was really didn't know a lot. And I just fired up a Gatsby site, and I'd never touched React before, and I just fumbled my way through it, Googling everything I could. And that was actually a really efficient learning experience, because I was trying to just build a basic site in Gatsby. And it just gave me like immediate problems to solve, instead of just like having a wide landscape of like, well, what do I search for?
It's an interesting
so yeah, I learned
providing problems as a learning experience, as opposed to it just works experience, where maybe you'll probably get something up quick, but you won't figure out all the things you'll run into at some point.
Yeah, and it gives you more motivation, because you're like, okay, I know I want, my site to like have like a card layout on the main page. Okay, right, how do I do this? It's a very performance directed sort of learning experience.
Yeah. So on the flip side is how, aside from the development process for this, what was the like design layout kind of process behind thinking about the UI features? Or I don't know if you're even thinking about it that way, but just whatever, everything that goes into the layout of the page. Were you just kind of trying different things out and seeing what works, or did you, I don't know, sketch things out?
Yeah. I definitely sketched out very, very basic, just like wireframes
Okay.
of ideas of ways I might do it. And I sometimes prototype a bit in Figma or Sketch. I mean, they're very interchangeable. So I'm really just trying to figure out like a specific style of something. But mostly I design in CSS just because it's so satisfying to have that, I'll just set up my two windows and be able to immediately update and like see the change and make sure it's working the way I want it to.
Yeah.
That I've never found a better way to do that, because even if you're doing static mockups in Figma or something, it's so like finicky, and you're trying to make sure, and you're not really thinking in the box model of padding and margins, and you're not taking into account how Flexbox is going to behave, and being able to resize the window constantly to see how fonts are resizing. So I can't really design outside of a live environment, because it's too different from the actual medium.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then I guess the third part or did you have something more on that front?
No. I mean, I was gonna say the whole thing of let's see, I love like responsive Flexbox stuff. That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
It took a long time. I didn't know Flexbox before I built the site. Well, I knew it badly and I didn't know how to control it. But thinking through actually like the design stuff in more like the information architecture sense of like tags and filtering and how you organize where content goes, like that, I think I find much more enjoyable than like troubleshooting Gatsby.
And that was also kind of like a gradual process of building the site. You didn't come in with like this is how I'm gonna organize everything. This is the digital card and these are the 3 categories or things like that.
It was definitely like, because my site before was a very different version of this, or my domain, like maggieappleton.com, used to be a WordPress site for the last like 5 years from when I set it up back then. And then it was just like, oh, I'm gonna have to like move it at some point, but you just keep putting it off, and it's never a good time to like rebuild your entire website from scratch. And then COVID happened, and I was like, well, hey, I've got a lot of time indoors on Friday night. Maybe I should attempt to do that Gatsby rebuild I've wanted to do for 6 months. And I felt like I had learned enough to be able to do it. Was like before that, I knew I wanted to do it, but I really wasn't confident I was going to be able to do it and not have the code base be just such a like spaghetti mess that it would like devolve really fast. But I had built a different site called illustrated.dev, which I've now retired and now forwards to this site first, and made a lot of mistakes on it, and through that project learn what to not do with Gatsby sites, and then this sort of like a 2.0 iteration. So a lot of these posts, like this one about like how to build databases, this was originally on illustrated.dev, and that site was more focused on just illustrations that explained web development concepts, and I wanted to bring in more anthropology and more education stuff and more linguistics, so I sort of combined them. So a lot of the notes just got ported over, like these ones, like this is an introduction to Rust, which is like a programming language that used to be on the old site, but still fits into here.
One question I had is, given so porting that content over, and given that like parts of your site are so illustration heavy, you kind of touched on this earlier with the image stuff, but were there other challenges in making the images work, whether technically or look the way you want it to, or anything like that?
Yeah, I definitely have to put a lot of effort into, maybe it's why I also have so many custom components, is most of them are layout based. They're mostly like, okay, I want it to be like, 2 columns and 900 pixels wide, and I want like the images to work a certain way. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Even like on this essay, this is maybe a more image heavy one. Let's see, like I like building like custom components like that. Like I haven't written part 3 and 4 yet. I'm very open to these. But like that sort of thing, like this is where being able to design in code, you get to think in that interaction sense, and you get to think in like, oh, and this could be a link, and we could have something pop up here. So I love that kind of stuff. So like this, like building custom components like this for specific posts. Like, so these are all links, but then I had to like pull in images and lay them out in a foregrid and like make sure the Flexbox worked, or like this then becomes a 3-piece grid you have to build a whole component for.
And so when you're doing things like that, is it part of the writing process of doing something like this, where you'll start with like a post you're working on and switch to trying to do components to fit into it? Or is it more like you start with components and then kind of build them in, or separate out those two processes?
I definitely write in while coding out the layout. So this is one of those funny things too, where like, especially writing blog posts, I know a lot of people, and a lot of people I know are into Rome in this, so I might reference Rome a lot because that is where ideas start. So I have, let me just pull up Rome, because I have
Does your new tab
like
automatically open up into Rome?
oh, I have a hotkey that opens up a new tab into Rome.
Ah, okay.
That's a keyboard maestro thing.
Nice.
One of those, like it's all the Rome stuff. This is like a
Oh.
new tab in Rome, or like a new Rome window to the right, and that sort of
cool.
thing. So if I say garden note, oh, now it's going to be real slow. Oh, that was almost the page I wanted. We almost got there. So yeah, I know a lot of people will write their full blog post in Rome and then like export straight to MDX, but because I like combining visuals like quite deeply into the content, like that seems to me like an inherent part of the writing, like it's not just the words.
Okay.
So I will start ideas in Rome, like these are all like posts in progress. Like actually this is a good example of that. Like this is a post where I'm just gonna like list out like classic anthropological books. A lot of people are like, well, where do I get started learning about cultural anthropology? And I want to be like, these are the best books and the best articles on it. So I have like a basic introduction written up, and like a list of books. But what I'll do with this one is build a custom component for books, and like articles will look different, and like have a visual for each one. I'll go get the covers from library thing, and I'll do up a book component that's probably similar to my bookshelf like thing for each book in the series. So that's one thing where like I can't really make the whole post in Rome, and I find that constantly with all the notes in the garden. I want to play around with like, well, what if I could hover over bits of it and it would change? I haven't done as much of that as I wanted yet, but some of these have this, like this is an explanation of APIs. And my favorite thing about it is this takes you to the API like YouTube docs, but this like awesome. Slight animation just like makes me very happy. It took me a while to figure out how to do that.
And right there in the image as well. Damn.
Yeah, so it's like a PNG, and then I layered an SVG on top of it, and then animated the border of the SVG.
Oof.
Yeah,
and just
hard-coded
the pixel of dimensions so it's in the right position. Or...
Yeah.
It looks really cool.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff is interesting to play around with, because that's when you actually start playing with the web as a proper medium. Like you're not just treating it as like we're just posting text up to this thing. It's saying like, okay, it's actually an interactive document.
And do you find the like content of what you're writing will change in response to what like interactions or features are possible, or is it kind of like the content comes in fair, like the points you want to make are fairly fleshed out, and then you kind of play around with the other stuff?
I suppose I always know my main point when I go into a piece. Like I'm like, okay, I know I want to say this one thing. And with notes, that's the beautiful part, right? Is like you don't have to write like a full essay with multiple points and subpoints and arguments and supporting pieces. You can be like, here's one simple idea, done. Like I'm trying to think of a good example of what would be actually this one is a really good example of that. So this is like I heard about the whole computer supported collaborative learning as an academic field I learned about from Stian, and I was very like, okay, I'm just going to go wide-eyed into reading every academic paper I can find on like introductions to CSCL is what they call it. And then it was fun to like build little mini components, right, that like link to the original paper and highlight certain parts of it for these. So like that'll link you to the main ResearchGate paper where I found it. And so that's like a custom React component. And it's one of those where like if you were trying to write this without the ability to like build custom components and play around with layout. I mean, I suppose you could do visual design tricks that would like make it work, but it's so much nicer to be able to have full control over it. Yeah, I just like being able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Are the like custom things fairly unique to posts, or are there things that you like tried in one post and then turned out to be useful all over the place?
I should probably be more consistent than I am. Like, I like now if I put in an academic paper quote like that, and actually, so if I go to that post in particular, config, CSCL, it just makes it more efficient for writing as well. See, so I've called that component research item.
Okay.
And that's the title of the paper, and that's the link it goes to. And then inside the research item component, I wrap the quote.
Gotcha.
And like author, formatting. So now, ideally in the future, if I remember that I've built that research item, in a future note post, if I wanted to reference an academic paper with a quote, I would just go do that same formatting in it. I've only found like there have only been 1 or 2 times where I have like built a component and then like a week later been looking at my components list and been like, oh, I already built that like twice. But mostly I try to keep it pretty consistent. I mean, just in terms of like a user experience, like principle as well, right?
Yeah.
You don't really want to like
3
have
slightly
4
different
different
implementations.
styles. Yeah. So I'm trying to keep like all books look the same, all little notes look the same, all that sort of stuff.
Gotcha. Just because this came to mind looking at this, but how do you find the kind of like ergonomics of MDX, the like interleaving the JSX tags and writing Markdown? Does it come pretty easily? Do you run into like syntax errors with unclosed tags or things like that, or does it work out most of the time?
Yeah, that's the fun bit about MDX. So like, let's say I remove this, right, and I'm just like, I forgot to put it in. So we try and save that. So it's not going to tell me what's wrong. It's going to give me an error of some sort that it can't read the front matter of an MDX file. It doesn't tell me which MDX file. I just have to go look at the ones I most recently edited and then just like read through them and be like, where did I miss a bracket?
Okay.
So I would say it's not not a good developer experience. I have to be very careful. So far it's fine. Usually it's one of those where like I've just copied and pasted a bunch of stuff in and I'm like, okay, I know I did that messily, like that's not it's not gonna work.
I guess that's just a product of it probably being a fairly young tool and also the like build pipeline. So what's actually happening with the MDX is it's getting processed at like runtime in your Gatsby app. It's like getting rendered in another React component. It's not like getting built into or getting parsed into a top level page itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see. It's in, it is being run through. Well, the notes are a bit odd because they run through the Gatsby brain thing. But like my essays are also written in MDX. So all of these, this is just like an MDX file.
Okay.
But that's being run through this essay template, which I guess it is just a component. It's just in the templates thing. So it's just a difference of how Gatsby processes it.
Okay.
But when you look at it, it's just default. It's exporting a function that is a layout container, and this is what provides the components to it.
Gotcha. Cool. So every page has access to every component you've ever put in there, and you can just drop them in when you want to.
Yeah, as long as I put the components within this MDX file, and then ones that don't need to be rendered by MDX can go in this top level file. So these are more, right, like navigation bar, buttons, like that sort of thing.
Gotcha. What's the like, because this seems like, I don't know what the scale of Gatsby sites usually is, but this seems like a pretty large-ish site, like lots of content, lots of components. So the like general build, rebuild time on this kind of thing, like is the flow pretty quick, or do you find yourself, like you mentioned with the images, but past that as well?
Luckily, yeah, it improved a lot with images. So, I mean, in terms of Gatsby scaling, I mean, I'm sure for a personal site, it's probably in terms of just like images and unnecessary complexity, perhaps more than other people's. But at the same time, I know Gatsby's used for like whole like e-commerce sites, right? Like hundreds of pages. Like they definitely, it gets used at scale. I've never personally seen the back end of one of those, but I assume it's just as chaotic. But for build time on this, I think I'm at about 4 minutes right now, and it deploys to Netlify, which is glorious. It just magically, right? Like I pushed a master and it just runs the pushes to deploy. It's great.
Nice.
Yeah. So I don't even know if that's a good number. I'm like, I think I'm proud of 4 minutes because my old site was 9 minutes. So my bar is not well adjusted.
So we had one quick question earlier, which we missed, which was, have you tried Framer at all? I don't know if that's relevant. I'm not super familiar with Framer.
Is that Facebook's React design thing?
Maybe.
You can look it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe not. I've heard of it. The prototyping.
Maybe that question was when we were talking about Figma and that conversation.
I know I've downloaded this and played with it, and I could tell it was like helping designers use React. So it looked really handy, but it was one of those where I couldn't figure out how it worked, and I was like, I'm just going to go use React. Like, I don't understand what this tool is. It'd be great, but I couldn't figure out the UI, and I watched a bunch of the intro videos and was still like, I don't understand.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it looks cool though.
Yeah, interesting. I think if you can fall back to just like playing with components in CSS, it's always just easy to fall back to doing that.
Yeah, but I mean, this looks like it's super needed, right? Like I know so many designers that I'm sure their work would be much better if they did have the ability to write. You have live updates and you work in native CSS code, but this thing of like getting someone set up with a modern web development project today, if they only know CSS and have no clue what Node is and don't have like VS Code installed, it's just like, oh, I mean, I remember, going through it myself, and it was just like weeks of just like high anxiety stress because you're just everything constantly broken and no one can explain to you. Like they're like, oh, it's so complicated, just don't.
And you just have to do this. Like you just have to get like NVM to get a different version of Node or whatever. Yeah,
that was actually when we were building the bi-directional links, and we did it over an Egghead like live stream with Angus and everything. And we spent 20 minutes troubleshooting an NVM like node installation problem where like my version was version 10 and we needed version 12 for the plugin, and then like something in my bash configuration broke, and we were just like, oh.
Why do we
you're never solving the problem you're supposed to be.
Tom asked earlier about your workflow for illustrations broadly. I know you've talked about it in general, but yeah, it would be interesting to see how it fits into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it was a better integration, but the limitations of technology is like the web is designed for text. So I'll usually have like an idea in my garden notes for some. I'll have to move the Zoom thing to be able to see what I'm doing here. Or we'll just move the, okay, we'll go with that. I'm trying to think of one that would have been in my garden notes that had an illustration where I'll like have a page for it in any of these, no, or maybe one of the alive ones. Anyway, there's some of these where like it's literally just like an empty page where there's nothing on it because I couldn't, yeah, that's pretty empty. Because this in my head is like an illustrated note, and then what happens is I like kind of know what I want to say. Maybe I'll do research and like write up the basic script for it, and then I work on an iPad Pro in Procreate, and it gets into like a bit of like environmental setup where I'll like have my notes open and I'll draw the concept out, and that's when it gets much more into like I'm working in Procreate and doing sketches, and then once the illustration is complete, I'll upload it to Cloudinary, and then like what's a good, actually this is a good example of that. I just did this for the Mary Douglas piece. Oh, that's the wrong hotkey. I don't know my hotkeys anymore. Right, this is like a fully illustrated one that's explaining like this cultural concept of what dirt is as defined by Mary Douglas. But this the process for this happened all in Procreate, and then it just got uploaded, and it doesn't have a lot of like text integration or MDX integration, I guess. It's literally just like an image on a note. And I wish they were more integrated, but it always becomes finicky, or the process of doing it can like upload sketches from my iPad pretty easily and drop in a mock-up and move it around. But I found I end up having notes be either like all text or all illustration, and the blending of them is still a problem I haven't been able to solve that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think, a particularly tricky one. So when you're just doing an Illustrator note, will it, if you're working in your iPad, will it be kind of like you'll do multiple drafts of the thing, or do you come in with a fairly, like, are you trying out pieces of it individually and then stitching them together, or how does that work?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I have a draft of this one. Came together pretty quick. So I'm looking in my Procreate to see if I have a draft. I guess I kind of do, even like this was funny. We're in another group that's like working on doing some like speculative future stuff, and I was sketching out a potential, like, I don't know if you can see that. That is supposed to be like a hypothetical concept for an at-home in-kitchen cricket farm. It was based off this game called Thing from the Future, where you're given these 4 cards that like suggest different ways to design things that might exist in the future. Wow. So I do a lot of that where I'll like sketch it out in blue pencil first, and then I'll do a new layer on top and do a more like this sort of like more fine line work, like you might see here. This starts as a very rough blue sketch, and then I do one layer on top. But in terms of layout and everything, that'll all happen on the iPad, and maybe I'll usually sketch out like a square frame for the window browser, and maybe say, okay, I know it's going to be 80% width, and maybe I can put like a small component here on the left and like do that sort of layout. But yeah, any illustration, it doesn't have a lot of back and forth. It's sort of like idea starts in Rome, goes to the iPad, and gets pretty much all planned out there, and then comes back into MDX.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. Are there any other bits you've been kind of itching to get into that we haven't had an opening for yet, or?
I don't think so. I liked this. I just stole this off John the other week, a Now page, which was like I think a Derek Sivers thing originally. Yeah. But it's something in between your like about page is like a long term, right? Like, here is me at a 1,000-foot view. And then Twitter is like too fast, right? It's like what you're thinking of every couple minutes. And this is supposed to be some in between, like something you update every month or every 2 months. So it's like a log of what you're currently reading. So I really like having this up. And I really like the idea of people putting up like the books they're reading right now. And like, I like the idea of putting something like keen to discuss. It's not a good title. I need a better name. So if anyone has that, but like, something to the effect of like,
please talk to me about this.
Yeah, actually that would be a good title. Like, like, here's 3 things I found this month, and I'm dying to like hop on a call with a bunch of people and like talk about them. And I know we've discussed like how do we make that sort of interaction happen between people. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was some more designed, less frictionless way to just be like, oh, I read that too, or that looks really interesting to me. Like, how do we automatically set up a call with a couple of us and like talk through it? That sort of like pattern design feels like it would be really cool to figure out. But this, in reality, it's like you find the person and then you're like, oh, are you free at this time in this time zone? Like, do you want to send me a Zoom link, or did you just message me on Discord?
Oh boy, yeah, that's definitely. I hope we could have a whole call, but we haven't. Yeah, for this, like, so I imagine everything you're reading also has a page in your bookshelf. Is that like, have you thought about connecting that deeper than links, or like having status? I don't know.
I know I was wondering whether to put status on books. Actually, I probably should. I haven't paid as much attention to the bookshelf, actually. That's probably what's going to get my love next, now that I've like sort of figured out the digital garden a bit more. Because like, so this one has notes on it, so that's why it's orange. So that goes to the visual explanations notes. And the others, I simply haven't uploaded notes for them yet. They're still sitting in my room. And mostly because I'm like in chapter 2 and I'm always like, oh, is it worth uploading the notes yet? But ideally, yes, it's like those would link to the pages. And then, yeah, I want to find some way to be able to say, because like, what are the stages of reading a book, right? They're like 20%, like 40%. And then I worry, then you get into the mindset of the obligation to finish, which I hate with books, where I want to be able to like read chapters 3 and 4 and then do nothing else if I want to, you know?
Totally. Get whatever you needed out of it out at the moment. Yeah. Have you
or another one is papers, right? This is like a short paper, it's not a book, which I've gotten stuck on actually. Like that's the same for this one here. This is an academic, well, it was a talk. So I wrote, this is technically an academic paper, not a book, but you know, what does book mean? So I made a fake cover for it, and I was thinking of how else you handle that when something's a research paper and it doesn't have a cover, but you don't want it to look like weird on your bookshelf. And should it be on your bookshelf? It's not a book. But
making a cover is definitely a heavyweight solution to that, but I guess it works.
It's not a great cover, but it's, you know,
it fit right. I wouldn't have known it wasn't the cover if you hadn't called it out. So.
And then I also hate how this is just the designer, right? I'm like, oh, this cover's so ugly, but like there's no other covers for this book, and I really want to redesign the cover myself, but I don't think that's like appropriate. So
there are limits.
I have that problem with a few of these. Yeah.
Have you? So it sounds like the Rome to blog/illustration process, or to blog mainly process, is fairly manual right now. Have you thought about like, I don't know, Rome API, Rome export type stuff?
I have looked at those, and a lot of people have like messaged me and said like, hey, you should look at my tool I built. You know, it's really cool, like API that syncs them together, and if you change something in your Rome, it changes it in your website. And like that, while that all sounds completely wonderful to me, like I would love that. You get into the problem of the visuals again, because you can't do layout and custom components and images in Rome, which I'm not suggesting Connor build that. I'm not suggesting we put like an IDE into Rome. No. Yeah, it would be cool. But it means that there's no way to do the direct one-to-one translation, because it's like, you know, even if you put, you know, had images get pulled in, you know, I put different formatting on them, you know, I make them different sizes. I make some of them 2-column, I make some of them links. So I just don't see it ever happening. Which is fine. It's one of those where like, I know everyone, developers obsess over like the optimizing it or making it easy, which I totally get, but I really enjoy writing custom CSS for everything. Like, I'm just like, oh, I really want to like, let's do another box shadow on this. Why reuse an old one? Let's just write a new one.
That's
so
a
yeah,
superpower.
it's a indulgent hobby.
And it also is like, they're very like, Rome is, or note taking in general, it's like internal, right? And it seems your site in general is fairly made to be useful for people to actually see and work with, and those aren't going to be the same thing.
Yeah, I know it's like a big debate with digital gardeners too, is some people think it really should be your raw notes, like really just, you know, like you're just making your notes public. But I mean, that seems so inherently flawed to me. Like so many things I would write in notes, I feel like I would just stop being precious with my notes, which maybe people aren't, like they're just fine with it. But I definitely, you know, I'm thinking if someone's going to take the time to read this, I want to have written a complete sentence. Right? And I want it to not like have question marks in the middle and not be like Google this later written halfway through. So yeah.
I think that makes sense. Do you find yourself thinking a lot about like the ideal reader or the target audience for the kind of things that you're writing, or is it mainly just about the information you're trying to communicate?
Lately more. I think to some extent, like I follow my own interests, and actually, to be honest, like if we're going to look at the categories that are going on here, right? Like this is not a coherent audience, right? People who are like really into like linguistics and like the Rust language, right? So you can read about neologisms and what the fork is Rust, but like I don't think that's a natural pairing. Or like embodiment, you know, and Rome. I mean, maybe you're
maybe a little bit more with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that one actually might make sense. I probably should. I mean, because it is like you can only write from your own what you're exploring and researching, and mine right now is it's mostly like digital anthropology, and it happens to also be web development by nature of my job. But I don't know if the overlap of those two things is strong. So what I imagine is that I'm just doing a net, and it's just catching a bunch of people who are like sort of into those worlds, and I'm kind of hoping they bump into each other at the same time. Like if I did manage to get a bunch of like digital anthropologists on here and they know nothing about JavaScript, like that would probably be a good thing for them to be exposed to. So I kind of like that it doesn't make sense for a coherent audience at the moment.
We just had a question in the chat if you're familiar with Gordon Brander's site, gordonbrander.com, if you want to pull that up.
No, wait, so what's the, let me go to chat. Oh, I can't see chat.
Oh, no.
I have not seen this. Oh, wait, no, I have. Oh, yes. Okay, so like I didn't know the name, but now seeing it, I know. Because I got really excited when I saw this because they had design patterns on here too, and I had done I had just gone on this binge about pattern languages and Christopher Alexander, so I got really excited by this. Now I love the design of this place. I wonder if these are bi-directional, if they look like it. Maybe. No, they don't look bi-directional. That's still cool though. I do love the layout and design of this, and that they have a bookshelf as well. See, pattern language, great book.
Do you like keep track of references or inspiration or anything like that with your site, or is it just kind of like if you see something cool on the internet, you'll probably start implementing it or something similar?
I definitely track them a bit. Like I definitely have like collections of great footnotes that I really like from around the web, that I track in Rome, or I guess I also do it. So this is an app called Eagle that's more of an image collector app. So I guess I probably capture web visuals more here. So I'll take a lot of screen grabs in this. Let me see if I can find it in areas. This is also, I mean, true to my form, like 1,000 files for everything.
Seemingly well organized though, like.
Sort of. I don't know where to put them in areas. Well, somewhere in here. The design blog, web design. So little bits and pieces, probably not as much as I should. But like layouts, I like. Right, like this is a magazine called Implement that has really gorgeous design and really gorgeous illustration work. So I will sometimes save visuals like this, but usually when I find them again here, it's like I wanna see the interaction patterns more. So I always end up going to the live site anyway, because I'm like, well, I want to see how it adjusts when you go on mobile, and I want to see like if we go to Increment Live, it's going to be a completely different experience. Magazine. I don't know if they call themselves a magazine.
I think so. I think they have a
but like that detail is like lovely, you know, or like hover effects. Oh, so good. So that's really what I'm after. So yeah, I suppose I'm probably not as good about collecting these. They end up living in Rome, but yeah, if I see things like this I like, sometimes I will just go build a quick component for it. I don't know how if other people collect those in GIST or something. Actually, that's one idea I have. Probably am not the best at curating my development inspirations.
That sounds awesome. I've never heard of anyone like really intentionally collecting source code snippets they really like, but that sounds sweet. Someone should make a Pinterest for source code.
Honestly, that would make a good garden note. That's exactly the sort of thing you like. The MDX would be great for. Is you could be like, here's all my favorite like footnote designs, like actually have interactive footnotes on the whole page.
Totally.
Yeah, I might do that now.
That would be awesome. Footnotes, side notes, notes of all kind. Gets real meta.
Yeah, margin notes.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I think we're running up on the hour, so I think that's about it. I don't know. Any last things you want to dig into real quick before we close up, or I think we covered it all?
I think we got it all.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's awesome. I feel like there's like you could spend day or days just digging through this site. So I don't know if we got it all, but there's a lot awesome here. And thank you so much for guiding us through it.
Well, thanks for coming. I'm impressed that many people wanted to see a Gatsby like horror show on the back end.
It looks like it all works.
Yeah.
Uh,